Hello and welcome to our seasonal sampler series. In this video, you'll learn about using strip piecing and assembly line sewing to make multiple log cabin blocks. You'll also review setting triangles when making this log cabin heart. Ready to begin? You can find this supply list below along with links to the other videos and to the handouts in this series. This is a good pattern for experimenting with different trims and designs to make it your own. For example, scraps of lace and crocheted pieces were recycled from my family's leftover projects and added in the borders and around the heart. It's okay to leave this area blank, or maybe you could try adding an applique vine or a crazy quilt pieced border. This 6-inch log cabin block has a 2-inch center that's surrounded by 1-inch logs. I used this pattern in an earlier video where each one of these logs was precisely cut and then sewn together to form this log cabin block. Today you'll be making 3 log cabin blocks following a different technique. Instead of cutting individual logs, you'll begin by cutting strips. Before cutting, you'll want to decide where to place your fabrics. I often fold or roll up my fabrics to try out different combos. Some folks like to color in their pattern. Once you decide on fabric placement, press your fabric. Cut 3 2.5-inch squares for the centers and then cut 1.5-inch wide strips for the logs. It's important to keep organized when sewing this block. I like to line up the strips in the order that they're to be sewn so I don't get confused. If possible, place them on a board so you can move them closer to your machine. To get started sewing, I'll take the B strip and the A's. Let me just keep this nearby. Take a center square, put right sides together. Instead of starting with the leader, I just folded that over a little. I'm sewing using a SCANT 1/4-inch seam. That's about 1 thread over this way from the edge of this 1/4-inch foot, or my 1/4-inch mark. It's about 1 thread over that way. Pick up the next center, put right sides together, and continue sewing. Then add the last center. Cut off the extra. Take this to the ironing board and register this seam by pressing down and then press towards the log. Use the lines on your mat to line up the centers. Line up your ruler and trim. Continue trimming till you have 3 sections. You can use this handout to double check your accuracy. Stack these sections with the last log sewn on the bottom. The next log to be sewn goes here. Put right sides together. I'll fold this down as my leader and start sewing. You might have noticed that I don't use pins, but if you feel more comfortable with pins, it's fine to pin this first. Pick up the next section, put right sides together there and stitch. Add the next section and stitch. Register your seams. Press to the log. I like to use these lines on my ironing board to line everything up when I'm pressing. After trimming, you can check for accuracy. Continue adding logs in this manner. Don't forget, last one sewn goes on the bottom. Put right sides together. I like to add a little bit of space between and then sew. Once you get the hang of this technique, you'll like how much faster your blocks get completed, especially if working on a large quilt. Lay out your blocks. You'll need to cut some triangles out of this background fabric. These triangles in the corner are called corner setting triangles. They're also referred to as half square triangles because 2 of these make up a square. The straight of grain of these triangles is on the outside edge. I use this formula for corner setting triangles to figure out my cutting sizes. I started with this measurement 6 and plugged it into the formula, dividing by 1.414, and then I added 7/8 to that amount for seam allowances and came up with 5 1/8. That's the size of the square I cut, and then I cut it on the diagonal. This side on the larger triangle measures 12 inches. You plug that into the formula and then add 7/8 for the seam allowance. You'll end up with 9 3/8 inches, and then you'll cut that square on the diagonal. This triangle is referred to as a side setting triangle. Its straight of grain is on the longest edge. It's also referred to as a quarter square triangle because 4 of these triangles make up a square. The formula for side setting triangles is to multiply by 1.414. I'll use this measurement, which is 6 inches, and plug it into the formula. Then I'll add 1.25 inches for seam allowances, and I see that I need to cut a square 9 3/4 inches. And then cut that square on both of the diagonals. That way the straight of grain or cross grain ends up on this longer side. Unfortunately, you only need one of these 4 triangles, but maybe you can save the extras for another project. Lay out your heart. You'll sew in diagonal rows. Put right sides together. Make sure to line up these 2 edges in the corner and stitch. After sewing, press your seams in alternate directions. Fold this triangle in half and this block in half to get the center point. Put right sides together, matching center points, and sew. Do the same with this triangle. Right sides together and sew. After stitching, press your seams towards the outside edge. Put right sides together and stitch. Fold this triangle in half and press to find the halfway spot. Put right sides together, making sure to match that spot with this seam, and stitch. Repeat this process when adding this triangle. After sewing, you'll want to trim these little rabbit ears. Cut your border strips as listed on this handout, or you can decide to add your own borders, like I did here with these crazy quilt or free-form sections. Now you're ready to layer your quilt sandwich and then quilt as desired. For now, this is the last video for the Seasonal Sampler series. I hope you had a chance to work on some of the techniques featured in these tutorials. Working on small quilts is a great way to add to your quilting knowledge with minimum time and expense. The frame featured in this series can be used to try out new patterns, new techniques, and new quilting designs. It's also a great place to display some of those unfinished objects like this quilt made from leftover panels. Thanks for visiting LearnHowToQuilt.com. Please share our videos and patterns with your friends. Thanks.